The research station Prometheus hung like a metal jewel against the star-scattered darkness of space. Dr. Sarah Chen pressed her face against the observation deck's reinforced glass, watching the twin suns of the Kepler 442 system paint everything in shades of amber and gold. 3 years she'd been here, 3 years since humanity had made first contact with the Zephyrian Empire, and still the sight of alien ships docking at their station made her heart race. Today was different, though. Today, Ambassador Lyra Lai was arriving for the cultural exchange program that Sarah had fought tooth and nail to establish. The bureaucrats back on Earth had called it a waste of resources. The military brass worried about security breaches. But Sarah knew better. She understood that real peace, lasting peace, came from understanding each other as people, not just as political entities. The docking bay alarm chimed softly, and Sarah made her way through the station's corridors. Prometheus was a marvel of human engineering, but it paled in comparison to Zephyrian technology. Their ships moved like liquid mercury through space, powered by quantum drives that humanity was still decades from understanding. Yet here they were, working together, building something unprecedented in galactic history. Sarah arrived at the docking bay just as the airlock cycled open. The Zephyrian delegation emerged in a fluid procession, their tall, graceful forms moving with an otherworldly elegance. They stood nearly 7 feet tall, with skin that shifted between silver and blue depending on the light, and large eyes that seemed to hold the depth of eternity itself. And then she saw him. Dr. Marcus Webb stood at the edge of the Human Welcoming Committee, his dark hair slightly mussed from running his hands through it, a nervous habit Sarah had noticed during their video conferences. He was the xenobiologist assigned to the project, brilliant beyond measure, but somehow still humble about his achievements. When he smiled at something one of the Zephyrians said, translating a complex biological concept into terms they could understand, Sarah felt something flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with first contact protocols. Ambassador Lyra Lai stepped forward, her movements like poetry in motion. She was beautiful in a way that transcended species, with flowing hair that seemed to capture starlight and features that spoke of wisdom beyond her years. When she spoke, her voice carried the musical quality that all Zephyrians possessed. Their language evolved from song as much as speech. "Dr. Chen," Lyra Lai said, her English carefully practiced but tinged with that melodic accent, "it is an honor to finally meet the architect of this bridge between our peoples." Sarah found herself momentarily tongue-tied. She'd spoken to hundreds of aliens over the years, but there was something different about Lyra Lai, an intensity in her gaze that seemed to see straight through to Sarah's soul. "The honor is mine, Ambassador," Sarah finally managed. "Welcome to Prometheus." The formal ceremonies took hours. Speeches were made, gifts were exchanged, and the media feeds back to Earth captured every moment for the history books. But throughout it all, Sarah found herself watching the subtle interactions between the delegation members, the way Lyra Lai's eyes followed Marcus as he explained the station's life support systems, how her posture changed when he spoke, becoming more attentive, more focused. It was during the dinner reception that Sarah first noticed something that would change everything she thought she knew about interspecies relations. The main conference room had been transformed for the occasion, with tables arranged to accommodate both human and Zephyrian dining customs. The Zephyrians preferred to eat standing, their food served on elevated platforms that allowed for the social interaction that was central to their culture. Humans sat at traditional tables, but the arrangement allowed for easy mingling between the groups. Sarah was discussing the finer points of cultural anthropology with Dr. Vexhai, one of Lyra Lai's advisors, when she caught sight of Marcus and Lyra Lai in deep conversation near the large viewport. They stood closer than diplomatic protocol typically required, and there was something in their body language that spoke of a connection deeper than professional interest. "Your Dr. Webb is quite remarkable," Dr. Vexhai said, following Sarah's gaze. His understanding of Zephyrian physiology surpasses that of many of our own scientists. He's dedicated to his work, Sarah replied, though she couldn't shake the feeling that dedication wasn't the only thing driving Marcus's interest in Zephyrian biology. As the evening wore on, Sarah found herself paying more attention to the growing connection between Marcus and Lorelei. They seemed to communicate as much through glances and subtle gestures as through words. When Marcus laughed at something Lorelei said, the ambassador's skin took on a warmer, more golden hue, something Sarah had never seen in any of the Zephyrian diplomatic footage. It was well past midnight when the reception finally wound down. Sarah was reviewing the day's events in her quarters when her door chimed. She opened it to find Marcus standing in the corridor, looking troubled. "Sarah, I need to talk to someone," he said, running that familiar hand through his hair. "May I come in?" She stepped aside to let him enter, noting the tension in his shoulders. "What's wrong? Did something happen with the delegation?" Marcus paced to her window, staring out at the stars. "Do you believe in love at first sight?" The question caught Sarah completely off guard. What? "I know how it sounds," Marcus continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know how impossible it seems. But there's something about Lorelei that it's like she completes thoughts I didn't even know I was having." Sarah felt her stomach drop. "Marcus, she's an alien ambassador. The implications of what you're suggesting—" "I know." He turned to face her, and Sarah could see the confusion and wonder in his eyes. "Believe me, I've run through every logical argument against it. The biological differences, the political ramifications, the fact that we've known each other for less than 12 hours. But logic doesn't seem to matter when she looks at me like she can see right into my soul." Before Sarah could respond, her communication panel chimed with an incoming message. She glanced at it and felt her blood run cold. It was from Ambassador Lorelei, marked for Dr. Chen's eyes only. Sarah hesitated for a moment, then activated the message. Lorelei's face appeared on the screen, but she looked different somehow. More vulnerable, more human, despite her alien features. "Dr. Chen," Lorelei began, her voice carrying a tremor that hadn't been there during the formal proceedings. "I hope I am not overstepping boundaries by contacting you privately, but I find myself in need of guidance, and you are the human I trust most to understand the delicate nature of my situation." She paused, and Sarah could see her gathering her courage. "In my culture, we believe that souls recognize each other across time and space. When I met Dr. Webb today, I experienced something that our poets call Veltar Nesh, the song of souls finding their harmony. I believe you would call it love at first sight." Marcus made a small sound of surprise, and Sarah realized he was reading the message over her shoulder. Lorelei continued, "I know this creates complications that could affect the relationship between our species, but I cannot ignore what I feel. And I believe Dr. Webb feels it too. I need to know if there is any precedent for such a connection between our peoples, and if there is any hope that love can bridge the gap between worlds." The message ended, leaving Sarah staring at a blank screen while Marcus stood frozen behind her. "She feels it too," Marcus whispered. Sarah turned to face him, her mind racing through the implications. An alien ambassador and a human scientist, falling in love on the very day they met. It sounded like something out of a romance novel, except the political and social ramifications were very real. "Marcus, this could complicate everything we've worked for," she said. "If the wrong people find out about this, they could use it to undermine the entire peace process." "But what if it could strengthen it instead?" Marcus asked. "What if this is exactly what both our species need to see? That love transcends all boundaries?" Sarah looked at her friend, seeing the hope and determination in his eyes. Then she thought about Lyra Lie, about the vulnerability she'd shown in that message. Two people from different worlds, connected by something that neither science nor politics could fully explain. "There's never been anything like this before," Sarah said slowly. "No precedent. No protocol, no guidelines for how to handle an interspecies romance at this level." "Then maybe it's time to write new ones," Marcus replied. Sarah walked to her desk and activated her personal log, beginning to record her thoughts. If this was going to happen, and she had a feeling that nothing in the universe could stop it now, then someone needed to document it properly. Not just for the history books, but for the future it might help create. As she began to speak into the recorder, outlining the events of the day and the unprecedented situation they now faced, Sarah couldn't help but wonder if they were witnessing the beginning of something beautiful or the seeds of a diplomatic disaster. Outside her window, the stars seemed to shine a little brighter, as if the universe itself was holding its breath to see what would happen when an alien woman loved a human man. The next morning brought new challenges. Word of the cultural exchange was spreading throughout both the human and Zephyrian fleets, and Sarah could see the curiosity in people's eyes. Some looked hopeful, others suspicious. The weight of representing their entire species was something none of them had been trained for. Sarah found herself in the station's main laboratory, watching Marcus and Liralai work side by side on a comparative analysis of human and Zephyrian DNA structures. They moved together with an unconscious synchronization that spoke volumes about their growing connection. When Marcus handed Liralai an instrument before she asked for it, when she adjusted the equipment settings to match his preferences without being told, it was clear that something profound was developing between them. But it was also clear that they weren't the only ones who had noticed. Dr. Reynolds, the station's chief administrator, appeared at Sarah's elbow with a concerned expression. "Dr. Chen, we need to talk. Some of the crew are starting to ask questions about Ambassador Liralai and Dr. Webb, the way they're interacting." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "What kind of questions?" "The kind that could reach Earth Command if we're not careful," Reynolds replied grimly. "And given the current political climate, any suggestion of impropriety could be used to shut down this entire program." Sarah looked back at Marcus and Liralai, who were now leaning over the same display screen, their heads close enough that their hair was almost touching. As she watched, Liralai said something that made Marcus laugh, and the ambassador's skin took on that warm, golden hue again. "They're not hiding anything," Sarah said quietly. "They're just connecting." "That's exactly the problem," Reynolds replied. "Connection is one thing. This looks like something else entirely." As if summoned by their conversation, Liralai looked up and caught Sarah's eye. There was a question in her gaze, and a plea. She knew the scrutiny they were under, knew the risks they were all taking simply by allowing this to continue. Sarah made a decision that would echo through history. "Dr. Reynolds," she said, never taking her eyes off Liralai, "I need you to schedule a private meeting with Ambassador Liralai and myself. Tonight, after the formal sessions are over." "Sarah, what are you planning?" "I'm planning to ask the question that could change everything," Sarah replied, finally understanding the true weight of what they were all witnessing. "Because if love can truly bridge the gap between worlds, then maybe it's time we found out exactly what that means." The private meeting took place in Sarah's quarters at 2300 hours, when most of the station had settled into the quiet rhythm of night shift operations. Liralai arrived precisely on time, but she looked different than she had during any of the formal proceedings. Gone was the polished diplomatic demeanor, replaced by something more raw and honest. "Dr. Chen," Liralai said, settling gracefully into the chair Sarah offered, "I suspect you wish to discuss matters that go beyond cultural exchange protocols." Sarah poured tea for both of them, using the time to gather her thoughts. Ambassador, what I'm about to ask you might seem inappropriate, but I need to understand the full scope of what we're dealing with. Lyralay's large eyes fixed on Sarah's face, and she nodded slowly. Ask your questions. I will answer them as honestly as I can. In your message last night, you mentioned something called Veltar Nesh, the Song of Souls. Can you explain what that means to your people? A soft smile crossed Lyralay's features, and her skin took on a subtle shimmer. It is difficult to translate into your language, but I will try. Zephyrians believe that all consciousness resonates at specific frequencies, what you might call soul signatures. Most beings we encounter produce pleasant harmonies when these frequencies interact. But very rarely, perhaps once in 1,000 lifetimes, two souls find their perfect complementary frequency. She paused, staring into her tea as if seeing something beyond the physical world. When this happens, the two souls create a resonance that enhances both. They become more than they were individually. In your human terms, you might call it soulmates, but it is deeper than that. It is two halves of a cosmic equation finally solving themselves. Sarah felt her scientific mind wrestling with the poetic description. And you believe this has happened between you and Dr. Webb? I know it has, Lyralay replied without hesitation. From the moment I saw him, I could hear the harmony our souls create together. It is beautiful beyond description. But Lyralay, Sarah said, leaning forward, you've known each other for 2 days. How can you be certain of something so profound so quickly? The ambassador's expression became thoughtful. Dr. Chen, how long did it take you to recognize the beauty of a sunset? How long to know that music moved your heart? Some truths require no time to establish themselves, they simply are. Before Sarah could respond, her door chimed. She checked the security feed and saw Marcus standing in the corridor looking agitated. It's Dr. Webb, Sarah said. Should I let him in? Lyralay's skin brightened noticeably. Please. Marcus entered, immediately moving to Lyralay's side with a naturalness that spoke of their growing connection. Sarah. We need to talk about what happened in the lab this afternoon. What happened? Sarah asked, noting the tension in both their postures. Marcus and Lyralay exchanged a look, and Sarah saw a silent communication pass between them before Marcus spoke. We were working on the DNA analysis when something unexpected occurred. The Zephyrian genetic scanning equipment began detecting unusual readings from my biological samples. What kind of readings? Lyralay spoke up, her voice carefully controlled. Dr. Webb's genetic patterns show markers that should not exist in pure human DNA. Markers that suggest exposure to Zephyrian genetic influence. Sarah felt the room temperature seem to drop. That's impossible. Marcus has never been in contact with Zephyrian biology before yesterday. That's what we thought too, Marcus said, running his hand through his hair. But the scans don't lie. Somehow my DNA has been altered to be compatible with Zephyrian physiology. Compatible how? Marcus and Lyralay looked at each other again, and Sarah could see the wonder and confusion in their expressions. My respiratory system, my neural pathways, even my cardiovascular function, they've all been subtly modified to allow for closer interaction with Zephyrian biology, Marcus explained. It's as if my body has been preparing for this contact my entire life. Sarah's scientific mind reeled. You're suggesting that your DNA somehow knew you would meet Lyralay and altered itself accordingly? That's not how genetics work. Unless, Lyralay said quietly. The universe has been preparing for this connection far longer than any of us realized. The implications of what they were suggesting hit Sarah like a physical blow. If Marcus's genetic modifications were real, if they were somehow connected to his meeting with Lyralay, then this wasn't just an unusual romance. This was evidence of something far more significant, a cosmic plan that spanned species and possibly time itself. "We need to run more tests," Sarah said, her scientific training taking over. "We need to document everything, establish a baseline, figure out what exactly has changed and when." "There's something else," Marcus said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "The modifications aren't just one way. When we ran scans on Lyralai, we found that her genetic patterns have also been altered. Her biology has been modified to be compatible with human physiology." Sarah stared at them both, feeling as if the universe had just shifted on its axis. "You're both changing to be compatible with each other?" "Not changing," Lyralai corrected gently. "We believe we were always meant to be compatible. The modifications were present in both our genetic codes from birth, dormant until we encountered each other." "Like a cosmic lock and key," Marcus added. "Two halves of the same equation," as Lyralai said. Sarah stood up and began pacing, her mind racing through the possibilities. If this is true, if you two were somehow cosmically destined to meet and fall in love, then the implications for both our species are staggering. "How so?" Lyralai asked. "Think about it," Sarah said, stopping to face them both. "If the universe is capable of genetic predestination on this level, if it can prepare two beings from different worlds to be perfectly compatible, then what else might it be preparing for? What other connections might be waiting to be discovered?" Marcus's eyes lit up with understanding. "You think there might be others?" "I think," Sarah said slowly, "that what's happening between you two might be the first sign of something much larger, a biological imperative toward unity between species." The room fell silent as they all contemplated the magnitude of what this could mean. Then Lyralai spoke, her voice filled with wonder. "In our ancient texts, there are prophecies about a time when the barriers between worlds would fall, when different forms of life would find harmony with each other. We always thought they were metaphorical." "Maybe they weren't," Marcus said. "Maybe they were literal predictions of genetic compatibility emerging between species." Sarah felt a thrill of excitement mixed with fear. "We need to contact Earth Command and the Zephyrian Council. This discovery could change everything about how we approach interspecies relations." "No," Lyralai said firmly. "Not yet." Both humans looked at her in surprise. "If we reveal this now, without proper understanding or preparation, it could cause panic on both sides," Lyralai explained. "Some will see it as proof that our species should unite. Others will see it as evidence of cosmic manipulation that should be feared and resisted." Marcus nodded slowly. "She's right. We need more data, more understanding of what this means before we can present it to our respective governments." Sarah looked between them, seeing the love and trust that had developed so quickly, and understanding for the first time the true weight of what they were dealing with. This wasn't just about two people falling in love. This was about the future of interspecies relations, about the possibility that the universe itself was guiding the evolution of consciousness toward unity. "What are you both proposing?" she asked. "We continue the cultural exchange program as planned," Lyralai said. "But we also begin a careful private investigation into the genetic compatibility phenomenon. We document everything, run additional tests, see if we can find other examples. And we keep our relationship discreet," Marcus added, though Sarah could see the pain it caused him to say it. "For now," Lyralai agreed, reaching out to touch Marcus's hand. When their skin made contact, both their faces lit up with an expression of such pure joy that Sarah felt her heart break a little for what they were being forced to sacrifice. "I'll help," Sarah said. "We'll set up a private research protocol, run it parallel to the official cultural exchange. If there are others like you two, we'll find them." Over the next several days, the official cultural exchange continued smoothly. To outside observers, Ambassador Lyralay and Dr. Webb maintained perfectly professional interactions, but Sarah, watching closely, could see the truth beneath the surface. Every shared glance, every carefully casual touch, every moment they managed to speak privately, it all spoke of a love growing stronger despite the constraints placed upon it. The private research revealed even more remarkable findings. The genetic modifications in both Marcus and Lyralay weren't random. They followed specific patterns that suggested they were part of a larger design. More importantly, when they ran similar scans on other members of both delegations, they found that approximately 1 in 50 individuals showed similar latent compatibility markers. "It's like a genetic lottery," Marcus explained during one of their late-night research sessions. "Most people are compatible with their own species, but a select few carry the potential for cross-species bonding." "And it's not just between humans and Zephyrians," Lyralay added, showing Sarah the latest data. "We've identified marker patterns that suggest compatibility with at least 3 other known species." Sarah stared at the data, feeling the weight of discovery. "You're talking about the biological foundation for a galactic community, a universe where love truly can bridge any gap. But only if we can figure out how to make it work politically and socially," Marcus said grimly. It was during the final week of the cultural exchange that everything changed. Dr. Reynolds burst into Sarah's lab with a look of panic on his face. "Sarah, we have a problem. Earth Command has been monitoring our communications, and they've noticed the amount of private research being conducted. They're sending an investigation team." Sarah felt her blood run cold. "When?" "They'll be here in 3 days. And Sarah, they're not just investigating the research. Someone leaked information about Dr. Webb and Ambassador Lyralay's relationship. Earth Command thinks there's been a security breach." Marcus and Lyralay, who had been working at a nearby station, looked up with identical expressions of alarm. "What does this mean?" Lyralay asked. "It means," Sarah said slowly, "that we're about to face the question that could change everything, and we're going to have to answer it in front of people who may not be ready to hear the truth." The investigation team from Earth Command arrived exactly on schedule, led by Admiral Harrison, a stern woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that seemed to see through any deception. With her came Dr. Foster, a xenobiologist whose reputation for skepticism was well known throughout the scientific community, and Security Chief Martinez, whose job was to determine if any classified information had been compromised. The team immediately sequestered all research data and began conducting private interviews with every member of the Prometheus crew. Sarah, Marcus, and Lyralay were separated and questioned for hours about their activities during the cultural exchange. When Sarah was finally released from her interview, she found Marcus waiting in the corridor, his face pale with stress. "They know about the genetic compatibility research," he said quietly. "Foster has been through all our data. And Harrison. She has questions about my relationship with Lyralay that go way beyond professional interest." Before Sarah could respond, Lyralay appeared from another interview room, flanked by 2 human security officers. Her diplomatic immunity protected her from direct interrogation, but Sarah could see the strain in her posture. "Ambassador?" Admiral Harrison's voice rang out across the corridor. "I need to speak with you, Dr. Webb and Dr. Chen. Conference room 7, immediately." The conference room felt smaller with Admiral Harrison's presence filling it. She stood at the head of the table while the 3 researchers sat facing her, feeling very much like students called before a strict principal. "I'm going to be direct," Harrison began. "Our investigation has revealed evidence of unauthorized research, potential security breaches, and personal relationships that violate first contact protocols. Dr. Chen, as the leader of this program, you're ultimately responsible for everything that has occurred here." Sarah straightened her shoulders. "Admiral, I take full responsibility for the decisions made during this exchange. But I believe that what we've discovered here could change the future of human-alien relations. What you've discovered, Harrison replied coldly, is that emotions can cloud judgment. Dr. Webb, your genetic scans show unusual readings that our experts believe may be the result of alien contamination. It's not contamination, Marcus said firmly. It's compatibility. Natural genetic compatibility that suggests nothing more than biological anomaly, Dr. Foster interrupted, speaking for the first time. What you're proposing has no basis in established science. Lyrelai stood slowly, her full height giving her a commanding presence in the room. Admiral Harrison, Dr. Foster, with respect, you are discussing forces that your science is not yet equipped to understand. Are you claiming superior knowledge, Ambassador? Harrison asked dangerously. I am claiming different knowledge, Lyrelai replied calmly. Knowledge based on thousands of years of studying the connections between consciousness and biology. What Dr. Webb and I have experienced is not anomaly. It is the natural result of genetic preparations that have been in place since before either of our species achieved spaceflight. The room fell silent. Then Dr. Foster laughed, a harsh sound that seemed to echo off the walls. You're suggesting cosmic predestination, that the universe somehow arranged for you and Dr. Webb to meet and fall in love. It's fantasy, not science. Is it? Sarah asked quietly, standing to join Lyrelai. Dr. Foster, you've seen the genetic data. You've seen the compatibility markers, the modifications that couldn't have occurred naturally in either human or Zephyrian evolution. How do you explain them? Contamination during the first contact process, Foster replied stubbornly. That occurred 3 years ago, Marcus pointed out. I wasn't part of the first contact team. I've never been exposed to Zephyrian biology before this exchange. Then equipment contamination or... Dr. Foster, Lyrelai interrupted gently. How many impossible explanations will you create to avoid considering the one truth that explains everything? Admiral Harrison looked between them all, and Sarah could see the conflict in her eyes. The Admiral was a practical woman, but she was also someone who had spent her career making decisions based on evidence. Let's say, hypothetically, that what you're suggesting is true, Harrison said slowly. That the universe has somehow prepared select individuals for cross-species bonding. What are the implications for human security and independence? It was the question Sarah had been preparing for, the one that could change everything. Admiral, Sarah said, the implications are that we're being offered a chance to become part of something larger than ourselves. A galactic community based not on conquest or fear, but on genuine understanding and love. Or, Security Chief Martinez spoke for the first time, we're being manipulated by forces we don't understand for purposes we can't foresee. The room fell silent again, and Sarah realized that this moment, right here, right now, was the fulcrum on which the future would balance. The question that could change everything had been asked, in multiple forms, by multiple people. The question was whether love could truly be trusted to bridge the gaps between worlds, or whether it was too dangerous to allow. The answer would determine not just the fate of Marcus and Lyrelai's relationship, but the future of human-alien relations for generations to come. Admiral Harrison's decision would change the course of galactic history, but in that moment, she looked like a woman carrying the weight of 2 worlds on her shoulders. She studied the faces around the conference table, seeing the hope in Sarah's eyes, the determination in Marcus's posture, and the quiet dignity in Lyrelai's bearing. I need 24 hours to review all the evidence and consult with Earth Command, Harrison finally said. During that time, I'm confining this investigation to Prometheus Station. Nothing gets transmitted to either Earth or the Zephyrian homeworld until I make my decision. As the meeting broke up, Sarah caught Lyrelai's arm gently. Ambassador, there's something else you should know. We've been monitoring communications from other human stations, and there are reports of similar connections developing between humans and other alien species." Lyralay's eyes widened. "How many reports?" "7 confirmed cases across 3 different systems," Sarah replied quietly. "It's not just you and Marcus. This is happening everywhere humans and aliens are working closely together." That evening, Sarah found herself once again in the observation deck, staring out at the stars and trying to make sense of everything that had happened. The cultural exchange that was supposed to last 2 weeks had turned into something that could reshape the galaxy's future. Marcus joined her at the viewport, his reflection ghost-like in the reinforced glass. "Sarah, I need to tell you something I should have mentioned before." She turned to face him, noting the troubled expression on his face. "3 years ago, when the first Zephyrian ships arrived at Earth, I had dreams," Marcus continued. "Dreams about traveling to the stars and finding someone who would complete me. I thought they were just wishful thinking, the fantasies of a lonely scientist. But now you think they were something more?" "I think they were preparation," Marcus said. "Just like the genetic modifications were preparation. I think somehow, some part of me always knew that Lyralay was out there, waiting." Before Sarah could respond, her communication panel chimed with an urgent message. She activated it to find Dr. Reynolds looking harried. "Sarah, you need to get down to the communications center immediately. We're receiving transmissions from Earth Command and the Zephyrian Council simultaneously. They both want immediate updates on the investigation." Sarah felt her stomach drop. "Admiral Harrison said she had 24 hours. "That was before someone leaked the story to the Galactic news networks," Reynolds replied grimly. "The whole galaxy knows about the human-Zephyrian romance and the genetic compatibility research. Both governments are demanding answers." Sarah and Marcus rushed to the communications center, where they found Admiral Harrison standing in front of dual transmission screens, showing angry officials from both Earth Command and the Zephyrian High Council. "Completely unacceptable breach of protocol," General Morrison from Earth Command was saying. "Potential contamination of sacred genetic heritage." Councillor Veltar from the Zephyrian High Council spoke simultaneously. Both officials stopped speaking when they realized they were talking over each other, creating a tense silence. Admiral Harrison looked exhausted. "Gentlemen, I was in the process of conducting a thorough investigation when this information was leaked to the media. I need more time to—" "Time we don't have," General Morrison interrupted. "The President is fielding questions from Congress about whether we've lost control of our first contact protocols. I need answers, Admiral, and I need them now." Councillor Veltar's skin had taken on a deep purple hue that Sarah had learned indicated extreme agitation. "The Zephyrian people are equally concerned. If human genetic patterns are being altered by contact with our species, we must determine if this represents a threat to either of our peoples." That was when Lyralay stepped forward, moving into the transmission range with the grace and authority that marked her as a born diplomat. "Honored Counselor," she said, her voice carrying the formal tones of high diplomatic speech, "I request permission to address both the Zephyrian High Council and Earth Command simultaneously." Both officials looked surprised but nodded their agreement. Lyralay took a deep breath, and Sarah could see her gathering her courage for what she was about to say. "3 days ago, I experienced Veltar Nesh with Dr. Marcus Webb of the human delegation," Lyralay began. "For those unfamiliar with the term, it indicates a soul-deep connection that transcends physical form, what humans might call true love." The silence from both transmission screens was deafening. Since that time, extensive testing has revealed that Dr. Webb and I possess complementary genetic modifications that allow for unprecedented biological compatibility between our species. These modifications were present from birth, and represent what can only be described as cosmic preparation for our meeting. General Morrison found his voice first. Ambassador, are you saying that you and Dr. Webb are romantically involved? I am saying, Lyrelai replied with quiet dignity, that Dr. Webb and I have found in each other the completion that both our souls have been seeking. And I am saying that this connection represents not a threat to either of our peoples, but the first step toward a future neither of us could achieve alone. Counselor Veltar leaned forward on his screen. Lyrelai, child, what you describe is not possible. Veltar Nesh occurs only between members of the same species. With respect, honored counselor, our understanding of Veltar Nesh may have been limited by our experience, Lyrelai replied. Dr. Webb and I have documented evidence that soul connections can transcend the boundaries of species when the cosmic harmony is properly aligned. That was when Sarah stepped forward, knowing that this was her moment to ask the question that could change everything. General Morrison, Counselor Veltar, she said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to reveal, what if I told you that Ambassador Lyrelai and Dr. Webb are not unique? What if I told you that we have documented evidence of similar connections forming between humans and aliens across 7 different star systems? Both officials stared at her in shock. That's impossible, General Morrison said. Is it? Sarah asked. Or is it the natural result of an evolutionary process that's been in motion for thousands of years? A process designed to bring different forms of consciousness together in harmony. She activated her personal data pad, transmitting the compiled research to both screens. The evidence suggests that approximately 2% of both human and various alien populations carry dormant genetic markers for cross-species compatibility. These markers activate only when the individuals encounter their cosmically designated partners. Counselor Veltar studied the data with growing amazement. The genetic patterns, they follow the mathematical sequences described in our most ancient prophecies. And they correspond with quantum probability matrices that our best physicists are only beginning to understand, General Morrison added, his tone shifting from skeptical to wondering. Marcus stepped forward, taking Lyrelai's hand in full view of both screens. What we're proposing isn't radical or dangerous, it's natural. It's the next step in the evolution of consciousness, learning to find harmony not just within our own species, but across all forms of sentient life. The universe, Lyrelai said softly, is offering us a chance to become more than we are separately, to create something beautiful and new while still honoring what makes each species unique. Admiral Harrison looked at the data streaming across her screens, then at the young couple whose love had started this cosmic revelation. The question before us, Harrison said slowly, is whether we're brave enough to accept this gift or whether we'll let fear prevent us from taking the next step in galactic evolution. General Morrison was quiet for a long moment, studying the genetic data. Finally, he looked up at the screen. Dr. Chen, your report mentions that this phenomenon is already occurring across multiple star systems. If we tried to stop it now, would we even be able to? Sarah shook her head. The genetic activation seems to be triggered by proximity and emotional connection. As long as humans and aliens continue to interact, these pairings will continue to form naturally. Then the question becomes, Counselor Veltar said thoughtfully, do we support these connections or do we attempt to suppress them? And suppression, Lyrelai added quietly, would likely lead to significant psychological trauma for the individuals involved, as well as potential diplomatic complications between species. That was when Marcus asked the final question, the one that would determine everything. What if we embraced it instead? He said. What if we established protocols for supporting and studying these cross-species connections? What if we turned this into an opportunity rather than a crisis? The silence stretched for nearly a minute before General Morrison spoke. Dr. Webb, Ambassador Lyrelai, are you prepared to serve as the first official case study for human-alien romantic partnerships? Marcus and Lyrelai looked at each other, and Sarah could see the love and trust that had grown between them in such a short time. Yes, they said simultaneously. Counselor Veltar's skin shifted to a warm gold color that Sarah had learned indicated approval and happiness. Then let it be recorded that the Zephyrian High Council recognizes the legitimacy of cross-species Veltar Nesh and authorizes continued research into this phenomenon. General Morrison nodded slowly. Earth Command concurs. Dr. Chen, you're hereby authorized to establish a new department for the study of interspecies relations, with Dr. Webb and Ambassador Lyrelai as your first research subjects and advisors. As the transmission ended, Sarah felt as if she was watching the dawn of a new age. Marcus and Lyrelai embraced, no longer needing to hide their connection, while around them the crew of Prometheus Station began to whisper about the changes that were coming. Over the following months, the news of sanctioned human-alien romantic partnerships spread throughout the galaxy. Some species expressed interest in establishing similar research programs, while others remained skeptical. But as more and more cross-species connections were documented and studied, the evidence became undeniable. Love, it seemed, truly could bridge any gap. Sarah stood in her new office 6 months later, reading reports from across the galaxy. The Department of Interspecies Relations had grown from a single research station to a network of facilities spanning dozens of worlds. Marcus and Lyrelai had become the galaxy's first officially recognized interspecies couple, their relationship serving as both a symbol of hope and a subject of ongoing study. But more importantly, their love story had opened doorways that no one had imagined possible, trade agreements between species that had never communicated before, scientific collaborations that were advancing knowledge at unprecedented rates, cultural exchanges that were enriching every civilization involved. Marcus entered her office carrying a datapad with the latest research results. His wedding ring, a band designed to complement the Zephyrian bonding crystal that Lyrelai wore, caught the light as he moved. "Sarah, you need to see this," he said, excitement clear in his voice. "We've just confirmed our 100th cross-species pairing, and the genetic analysis suggests that the compatibility markers are becoming more common in newborns." Sarah looked up from her reports, smiling at her friend's enthusiasm. "You're saying that the universe is preparing for even more connections?" "I'm saying that what started with Lyrelai and me was just the beginning," Marcus replied. "The data suggests that within 3 generations, cross-species compatibility could be found in as much as 20% of all sentient populations." "A galaxy united by love," Sarah mused. "It sounds like science fiction." "So did faster-than-light travel, once upon a time," Marcus pointed out. "Besides, we've learned not to underestimate the universe's capacity for bringing souls together." As if summoned by their conversation, Lyrelai appeared in the doorway, her skin glowing with the warm contentment that had become her constant state since she and Marcus had officially bonded. "Sarah," she said, "the Zephyrian Council has sent word. They want to establish a permanent embassy here on Prometheus Station, specifically to study and support cross-species relationships. And Earth Command is sending an entire fleet of research vessels to explore the phenomenon in other sectors," Marcus added. Sarah looked between them, seeing the love that had started it all and the future it had made possible. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "when you first told me you'd fallen in love with an alien ambassador, I thought it might complicate our cultural exchange program." Marcus and Lyrelai laughed, the sound harmonizing in a way that spoke of their deep connection. "Instead," Lyrelai said, "it changed the galaxy." "Because," Marcus added, taking his wife's hand, "we were brave enough to ask the question that could change everything." "And what was that question?" Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. Whether love is strong enough to bridge any gap, they said together, their voices blending like their souls had from the very beginning. Outside the office windows, ships from a dozen different species moved through space in perfect harmony, their crews working together to build a future that no one could have imagined before an alien woman loved a human man and asked the universe to explain why such love should be possible. The universe, as it turned out, had been waiting for that question for a very long time. In the years that followed, historians would mark the moment when Ambassador Lirelai first met Dr. Marcus Webb as the beginning of the Galactic Renaissance, the period when the barriers between species began to fall not through conquest or politics, but through the simple recognition that consciousness seeks consciousness, that souls call to souls across any distance. But for Sarah, standing in her office, watching her friends plan for a future filled with impossible possibilities, the most important truth was simpler. Sometimes the most profound changes in the universe begin with two people brave enough to love without boundaries and ask questions that everyone said couldn't be answered. The universe, they had discovered, loved to prove everyone wrong.